If you have been approved for extra time. All right. This is the tutorial to adjust font. Any point you can see how much time is remaining. Upper right hand corner, just below the time remaining, you'll see your progress through the exam. For example, 2 out of 7 indicates that you are viewing 2 out of 7 questions. You can minimize the time remaining and question number reminders by selecting them to restore them at any point. Select the time and the icons. A warning message will appear when there's 15 minutes left on the exam to remind you of the time remaining. When there are less than 5 minutes, expires. Some exam items may not fit. Okay. You have not viewed the entire screen. All right. To select the one best answer. Let's see. And we're going. Which of the following modes of transport has 4 wheels? Car, tricycle, bicycle, unicycle. This is just so that we can answer it properly. You can highlight text that you think are important. Make sure that you have not accidentally selected or deselected an option while using highlight. Using the strike through feature, you can strike through feature to draw a line through answer options. Visually eliminate them. The exam allows you to flag items. Flag for review. To flag an item, you click flag for review or shortcut Alt F. You are allowed to review items at the end of the examination if you have any time remaining. If you select a flag review, a flag appears next to that. Items 5 out of 7 were flagged for review. Unanswered items display as incomplete. Okay. And one more thing, let me do this before I go any further on my side. There we go. Below summary of your answers. You can review the questions in 3 different ways. Review all questions, review questions that are incomplete, review questions. And the review. Allow 360 minutes to answer 170 questions. All right, let's go. A social worker meets with a 75-year-old client whose spouse died 6 months ago. In the intake interview, the client reports losing weight, having very little energy, and having difficulty getting motivated to do things. What should the social worker do first? So 75 years of age, spouse died 6 months ago, and losing weight, having little energy, difficulty getting motivated to do things. Complete suicide risk assessment, explore available families, suggest to schedule an appointment with a doctor, and refer a client to local bereavement. So it's either rule out medical, always do an assessment first, complete suicide risk assessment. There's nothing that shows me that. I'll probably rule out medical first always. A social worker is working with a 6-year-old child who was sexually abused. The social worker has been using play therapy techniques for several reasons, but the child is becoming more aggressive and continues to exhibit disturbing behavior such as bedwetting and masturbation. The child's foster parents feel that the child is not making progress in therapy and have asked the foster care worker to assign a new social worker. What should the social worker do first? 3 answers. 1, tell the foster care worker that the child is progressing as quickly as can be expected. Transfer the child to someone who specializes in child cognitive behavior therapy. C, educate the foster parents about the effects of child sexual abuse. All right. So a couple of things. Let's see. I think I'm going to rule out A, but let's see. So social worker, which one has everyone included? Social worker, child is becoming aggressive and continues to exhibit disturbing behavior such as bedwetting and masturbating. The child's foster parents feel that the child is not making progress in therapy and ask the foster care to assign a new social worker. What should the social worker do? Several sessions, transfer who specializes. Doesn't tell me whether or not this person is specialized or not. I would start with educating. That'll be the first thing. So option A is tell the foster care worker that she is progressing as quickly as can be expected. That the child is, and B is transfer the child to someone who specializes in child CBT, or educate the foster parents about the effects of child sexual abuse. All right, and A foster care worker, social worker meets with a man who is Japanese descent. The man is anxious because his spouse is pressuring him to move his mother into a skilled nursing facility. He prefers she lives with him. The social worker asks the man if he has any siblings or what his birth order is. The information is important to the social worker's understanding of the man's A, cultural perspective, B, support system, C, financial options, D, attachment style. I would say cultural perspective. A social worker who leads a therapy group plans to begin an extended leave. What should the social worker discuss with the group first? A, arrangements for continuity of the group's B, the group's progress to date. C, options for transferring to other groups. D, detail the reasons for the leave. So they don't need to know the reason. First, I would probably A, arrangements for continuity of the group. B is the group's progress to date. C is options for transferring to other groups. D is detailed reasons for the leave. So D is out of the question. So group progress to date doesn't deal with, so it's out of A and C. I would say arrangements for continuity. Next, 5, a resident is bedridden in a nursing care facility because of complications from surgery. The social worker is contacted after the resident deliberately twists an aide's finger while receiving a bath. The resident reports being injured during the bath and asks the aide to stop the bath. What should the social worker do first? A, have the resident transferred to a nursing care facility. B, provide ongoing staff training to deal with the diverse needs of residents. B, begin individual therapy to address the resident's anger. D, meet with the staff members and the resident to resolve differences. Let's see. So which ones will we rule out? B is not a first, it's an after. So which one involves everyone? I will rule out A. So for me, it would be between C and D. And I would need more information. Oh, that might be explore, so I'll check that one later. Let's see. So I think one may be explore. During the assessment process, a social worker teams learns that a client's self-reporting is incomplete. Um, what approach would most likely improve self-reporting? Guided imagery, role-playing, journaling, family input. Um, family input. This is not self-reporting. Journaling, role play, and guided imagery. Um, what do you see? Positive visualization, role play, kind of say what's going on. Journaling. Don't put journaling. A social worker is facilitating a new group. A social worker is facilitating a new group for teenage fathers. The goal of the group is to support and encourage fathers to become more engaged with their children. After reviewing the rules of the group and eliciting introductions, what should the social worker do next? So, forming, norming, right? Brainstorming, ask each father to describe the circumstances of his child's life. A, invite the fathers to discuss how they view their roles as parents. C, identify challenges to becoming more involved in their child's lives. D, ask each father to express his expectations of the group experience. Yeah, that's where I would go next. A 14-year-old client is referred to a family agency because of recent poor academic performance and behavioral changes, including lack of paying attention and social withdrawal. During the second family session, the client angrily describes physical punishment from her father. The father says that the punishment is necessary to prevent her from initiating behaviors of her friends. What should the social worker do first? assist the parents in exploring alternative modes of discipline. No. Inform the parents that the behavior requires a report of suspected abuse. Might be attempt to determine the severity of the physical punishment. Then D, help the client understand her parents' concerns. Rule out D. Okay, so I'm ruling out D. So got out of these three. It's either going to be I'll say B. A social work director is revisiting the process of orienting new staff to the agency. The revised process includes a day of training. The training will include time to tour the agency and review agency policies and procedures. To be most effective in helping new staff to succeed, what should the training program include? A, time to meet with a board member. B, group discussion about treatment methods. C, a session on clinical documentation requirements. D, presentation on agency's philosophies and values. That's good. To help new staff succeed. Let's see. It has to be between A. A is ruled out. Time with, so it would be whatever includes session on clinical. I would say between B, C, and D. Agency philosophy and values. I don't know if they do anything clinical. Well, that's what I would do. A social worker is working with a client who has been told that he must lose weight because his health is being affected. He reports that diets have not worked because he lacks the willpower to control his eating. He ends by saying how lonely he feels even with family and friends. He says that he feels like a big fat failure. What should the social worker do first? Encourage the client to set up a realistic exercise. No. Refer the client to a nutrition consultant. Suggest the client join a self-help group. Help the client explore the dynamics of the eating problem. I would explore. So first is always like that explore. I might go back and change question one. So we had question 10. A social worker is working with family whose adolescent son who is acting out. A family whose adolescent son who is acting out, right? During the assessment, the mother confides that she was sexually abused as a child. She has never addressed her past abuse and is interested in treatment. What type of group would be most helpful to the mother at this time? A structured therapy group focused on trauma issues, an extended family therapy group to help the mother confront her abuser, a mutual aid group for parents with adolescents, a psychodynamic therapy group focusing on current relationships. Let's see. Most helpful at this time. I would say between A, C, and D, mutual aid group for parents with adolescents. What type of group would be most helpful to the mother? Okay. Um, okay, so it's either between A and D. All right. All right. And a social worker is working with a family whose adolescent son. Yeah, I already did that one. All of the following elements are components of mental status exam except a level of reality testing, behavior during the interview, knowledge of general information, ego strengths. I would say ego strengths. Not even sure what that is. An 18-year-old client is referred to a social worker because of relationship problems. At the first appointment, the social worker learns that the client is deaf. The client is accompanied by a parent who knows American Sign Language and offers to interpret during the session. What should the social worker do next? A is allow the parent to interpret during the session. B, reschedule the appointment with a certified interpreter. Communicate with the client in writing. Reschedule. the age that bothers me. Okay. We'll see what's the right answer for that one. A social worker meets with a new client who is going through a difficult divorce. The client is tearful, expresses feeling that life will never be the same, and describes changes in eating and sleeping habits, so they're depressed. The social worker plans to administer depression inventory before, during, and after treatment. What is the social worker's primary reason for repeatedly administering the inventory? To assess the need for a referral to a psychiatrist. B, document the effectiveness of treatment. C, to justify the client's length of time in treatment, to gauge the impact of the divorce on the client. What is the social worker's primary reason for repeatedly administering? That's going to be my answer. It's between B and D. A doctor is required to obtain written permission to perform an autopsy on a deceased patient. The doctor asks the social worker to obtain the family's consent. The family refuses and is upset about the request. What should the social worker do next? A, help the family deal with the reactions to the loss. B, ask the family's cultural beliefs if the family's cultural beliefs prohibit an autopsy, what that has to do with it. C, affirm the family's right to make the decision. D, explore how the social worker can provide help. Affirm. First is normally explore. A social worker visits a client who is homebound. The client was referred by the community health nurse because of depression. The social worker finds the client minimally meeting basic needs, somehow confused and not able to provide much necessary information. As the social worker is leaving the apartment manager approaches. What should the social worker do? So homebound client, referred to by community health nurse because of depression. Social worker finds the client meeting basic needs minimally, is confused, not able to provide much necessary information. So there's a state of dysphoria. As a social worker is leaving the apartment manager approaches. What should ask the manager if the client has any family or friends. Leave without discussing the client with the manager. Give the manager a business card for the client's family and friends. They should already be aware. A client is housed temporarily in a domestic violence shelter with her children. The client is planning to return home where the perpetrator still lives. What should the social worker do first? Safety plan. Accept the client's decision. Encourage the client to end the abusive relationship. Explain the effects of domestic violence on children. Report the client to Child Protective Services. Do first. First. Do I have a case of suspected abuse? Um, all right. A social worker meets with the new client who has left their partner after several incidents of intimate partner violence. The client says that her partner has been dealing with anger issues and she believes that the partner is changing. She thinks that they will be reconciling soon and is excited about it. She asks the social worker what the social worker thinks about reconciling. The social worker has reservations about the client's plan. What should the social worker do first? No treatment with a partner. So answer A is discuss what changes the client is observing in her partner. Negotiate continued treatment prior to reconciliation. B, begin treatment with the partner. That's out of the question. So C is out of explain the social worker's reservations about the client's plan. So I would focus on insight from the client. So discuss what changes does she see. Upon beginning treatment with a new client, a social worker encourages the client to spend an extended period of time talking about past personal history and problems. During this time, the social worker asks some questions, but is focused mainly on listening to the client. What is the social worker's most likely purpose for doing this? Gathering diagnostic information, assessing for communication style, developing a treatment plan, determining appropriateness for treatment. So we're beginning treatment. Social worker is spending time listening as the person talks. I think that would be A, gathering diagnostic information. It's not assessing communication style, developing a treatment plan, determining appropriateness for treatment. Well, we're already there, so it's between A and C. And I would go diagnostic information, then we can go treatment plan. Okay. A 45-year-old gay man meets with a social worker because of a long history of depression. The client says, in most areas of my life, things are fine, but I've never had an emotional relationship that felt intimate. He also reports being distanced from the gay community because he is not political. And after all, it is no different from being straight, except that I have sex with guys. What should the social worker do first? Conduct comprehensive assessment. Explore the client's disconnect from the gay community. Refer for a medical evaluation. Suggest that the client consider joining. Okay. D would be last. History of what should a social worker do first? I think it's between. I don't have anything to say refer for medical. It's between A and B. Every time I see first, I think explore. Right? But I'm just gonna stick with first explore, but I think it's conduct a comprehensive assessment. Right? First. I'll go to this next. Select all the first four. I can get all the first ones right. I think I'll be in good. So 1 is first, 2 is first. A social worker meets with a client who describes growing discomfort with a partner she is dating. The client is concerned about the partner's excessive jealousy. The partner insists on spending all their time together and needs to make all the decisions. What should the social worker do next? A, invite the client to bring the partner into session. That's out of the question. B, explain that his behavior is characteristic of abusers. C, help the client decide how she wants to respond to the partner. D, explore why the client has trouble being assertive. It will be between B and D. Psychoeducation. Okay. All right. A social worker wants to summarize the findings of a complicated client case for the psychiatrist at her clinic. What method would be most effective for the social worker to use? A, provide a thorough written assessment of the client's presentations. B, use language that is descriptive and free of technical jargon. C, provide all of the collateral information about the client's problem. D, describe the client's problem, coping skills, and treatment plan. Um, will be for me between A and D. Also, a client who has hepatitis C is confined to a wheelchair nursing care facility. As the illness progresses, the client becomes increasingly depressed and anger. One day, the client abruptly cuts herself and attempts to bleed on several staff members. The social worker is consulted about how to handle the situation. What should the social worker do? Yeah, I would rule out refer out. So refer to the client for a psychiatric evaluation. B, encourage the staff to press charges against the client. C, work with the administration to have the client transferred. D, provide an in-service training for staff on the blood-borne pathogens. The client, next one is a social worker meets with a couple who comes from different backgrounds. They disagree about how to discipline their child. One favors strict discipline while the other favors negotiating solutions. Each feels criticized by the other. What should the social worker do first? Refer out to a parenting class. That's A. B, help the couple understand the differing responses. Coach the couples with making I statements. Recommend a combined approach to discipline. First, I would help them understand this between A and B for me. We'll see what's the real answer. A social worker meets with two young boys and their mother. The mother reports that the boys' behavior began soon after the boys returned from a visit with their father, who lives with his girlfriend and an infant daughter. The boy parents are involved in a bitter custody battle. During the initial interview, both boys tell the social worker that their father's girlfriend has beaten them with a fly swatter, burned the older brother with a cigarette, and threatened to kill the younger boy. What should a social worker do? A, encourage the mother to discuss the allegations with the boy's father. B, immediately report the allegations of abuse to appropriate authorities. And then C, request the boy's father report the allegations. So it's B. All right. And as we continue, a social worker experiences feelings of grief working with a client who is terminally ill. The social worker is reminded of a favorite grandparent who died 2 years ago. The social recognizes the experience of countertransference, but feels helpless to cope with it. What should the social worker do first? A, seek therapy. B, seek supervision or consultation. C, refer the case to a colleague. D, disclose the feelings to the client. Never D, so B would be my first go-to. A 49-year-old woman seeks therapy, citing problems with her mother. The client reports that her mother moved to a retirement community 7 years ago after the death of the client's father. The mother has adjusted and made many new friends. 6 months ago, the mother began dating a man, and they decided to live together. Since this decision, the client and her mother argue each time they see each other. The client says that the mother is not thinking clearly and is betraying her father. The client is very upset to think of her mother being sexually active. What should the social worker do first? Focus on the client's feelings about her mother, changes in behavior. B, recommend the client's mother have a psychological evaluation. That's not your client. C, discuss other possible living arrangement for the client's mother. D, explore the client's feelings about her deceased father. So I think A and D are important, but the stem that involves the mom and the daughter is A. A social worker meets with a 34-year-old client who is in recovery from cocaine addiction. The client has made progress and has shown improved social functioning. Recently, the client has been expressing self-pity and sorrow for what he has lost over the years of his substance abuse. The social worker notices that the client is increasingly depressed. What should the social worker do next? Refer client to a 12-step program. Complete a suicide risk assessment. Yeah. Explore recent changes in the situation, in life situation. Refer client for a medical evaluation. Let's see. It's between B and D for me. Explore is always the first. The next would be medical evaluation. I would do B, but it's between B and D to me. A 14-year-old student is referred to a school social worker. The student was involved in an accident that left him paralyzed from the waist down. He recently returned to school after a long hospitalization. The student does not want to be at school and is struggling academically and socially. What should the social worker do first? A, refer the student to a community grief group. B, arrange a meeting with the student and his teachers. C, evaluate the student for depression. Referring out would not be a first thing, so we can rule that out. Arranging a meeting would not be a first thing, so evaluate. It's kind of with the explore thing. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. I love my wife. A 23-year-old client who is a recent immigrant is transferred by his is referred to a social worker by his brother. The client says his brother believes he has a chemical dependency problem. What should a social worker do first? So my client, who is a recent immigrant, is referred to for the client to a social worker from the same country. Ask the client to agree to urine screen explore. So first is always explore circumstances that led to the immigration. Engage the client in a discussion of his substance use history. These both are part of the assessment. Let's see if we can engage the client in this. All right. Well, let's take a picture of this one. A child protective service agency social worker is working with a family who was referred because of child neglect. Okay. The parent has substance abuse and gambling problems. They frequently leave their children alone at night and fail um, to obtain routine medical care for them. The parents also keep the 10-year-old child home from school to watch the younger children. After completing a psychological assessment, what should the social worker do next? A and D, I think the them that includes everybody is D. Feel confident there. A social worker meets with a client who complains about reliving a motorcycle accident that he witnessed 6 years earlier. 2 people were killed in the accident. The client's having trouble sleeping and experiencing reoccurring nightmares. What is the most likely diagnosis for this client? Um, A, adjustment disorder with anxiety. B, acute stress disorder, which is not. C, generalized anxiety, which is not. D, post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder. Easy. Let's go. A social worker is completing an assessment on a 36-year-old client who reports multiple emotional problems. The client is married with 3 adolescent children. She reports over the past few months she has been irritable with her children and spouse, has no energy, feels anxious, difficulty concentrating, constantly sad. She tells the social worker, I just don't know what's wrong with me. What should the social worker do first? Assess the client's current level of cognitive functioning. Ask when the client had her last medical examination. Focus on the use of drugs and alcohol as likely contributing factors. We don't have that nowhere in the identify and engage the client's interpersonal support system. So C and D is out of the question. And this is the first question. Let's flag it. So explore assessment. Let's rule out anything medical. I would ask. We'll have to rule out medical. Yeah. That's tough. That's tough. That's tough. That's tough. We'll see. A client requests that the social worker accompany her to weekly Church services, what should a social worker do first? A, accommodate the client's request. B, interpret the client's dependencies. C, consult with social work supervisor. D, clarify professional boundaries. D, it's clear. Let's go. Social worker asks client for a written permission to disclose confidential information to social worker's clinical supervisor who is not at the same agency. What is the most important thing that the social worker should tell the client? The risk involved in releasing the information, the reason for providing information to the supervisor, the rights of the client to refuse to release the information, the impact of treatment if the information is not released. The right to refuse. Reasons don't really matter. It can seem like you're trying to sway the person. A child protective service agency social worker meets with a single parent who recently left an abusive partner. The parent has found a job cleaning houses but has to take the 3-year-old son to work. The parent admits to spanking the son and reports depression. What should the social worker do first? Refer the parent for a medical evaluation, help the parent arrange daycare, enroll the parent in single parent support group, require the parent to begin weekly therapy. So CPS already been called. At the recommendation of the school counselor, a parent requests that a social worker assess her 10-year-old son because of persistent fighting in school. The parent says the son is well disciplined in the home and neighborhood after obtaining a social history. What should the social worker do next? A, obtain a release to talk with the school social worker. B, arrange to meet with the son. C, review the school records on the son's school adjustment. D, ask for another family member about the son's behavior. Next. Next. A social worker is leading a task group whose goal is revising the admissions criteria for a day treatment program. The group consists of staff from the day program, case managers, and nurses from agencies program serving the same client population. The client observes that when case managers or nurses offer suggestions, the group either ignores the suggestions or ridicules them. What should the social worker do next? A, wait to see if the case managers or nurses point out the dynamics. B, praise suggestions made by case managers. C, share the observations of the behavior patterns exhibited. D, talk to the day treatment staff members privately about the problem. A social worker meets with a client who is seriously distressed by chronic physical illness. The client reports feeling overwhelmed by the effects of the illness and the stress that it has placed on the immediate family. The client reports feeling sad and hopeless at times, finds unstable to perform everyday tasks, and is not sleeping or eating well. What should the client social worker do first? This is Kaisha. This is a good example. Educate the client's family about the effects of chronic illness. Refer the client for medical evaluation. Complete a suicide risk assessment on the client. Assure that the client that depression is normal to people with illness. First, it's between C and D. I'll probably complete the suicide risk assessment first, and then I can assure. But I guess we have to validate a person's emotions first, which is what I did. But I should have assessed, right? The social worker meets with a family. The parents have requested help in dealing with their young child's behavior. During the session, the child frequently interrupts attacks the parents. If family can leave yet, their parents ignore the interruptions. What is the best action for the social worker to take? A, ask the child to say why the family needs to leave. B, tell the child to wait for permission. C, suggest the parents respond to the child. D, ask the parents how the interruptions make them feel. Explore. A social worker is contacted by a client who initially expresses a desire to become more assertive. However, once therapy begins, the client is unable to carry out treatment tasks. The client indicates that she is fearful of initiating change because her culture does not approve of assertive women. What should the social worker do first? Support the client's effort to pursue original goal. Renegotiate the goal with the client. Discuss the client's perception of the cultural conflict. A client tells the social worker that he has difficulty understanding why he gets so angry when his supervisor criticizes his performance in any way. After exploring the issue further, the social worker relates the client's reaction in this situation to relentless criticism by his mother during his childhood. What type of intervention is described by this exam? Confrontation, defense analysis, clarification, interpretation. Ooh, this is good. This is good. Ooh. Well, let's learn behavior. Site oriented. A social worker meets with a parent who complains of constant arguments at home between the adolescent's child and her new spouse. The arguments focus on the child's poor school performance and have increased in intensity. Since the spouse was laid off from work, what should the social worker do next? Recommend consulting the school social worker, schedule a session with the entire family, C, assess the client for clinical depression, D, offer employment assistance or spouse. During an initial session, a couple requests assistance with long-standing marital problems that have led to several separations in the past. The social worker also learns that one partner will begin an overseas assignment in 6 weeks. What is the social worker's best approach to treatment requests? A is recommend an intensive weekend marital enrichment retreat. That I don't think that's going to get to anything. Focus on issues that can be resolved in the short term. It sounds like brief solution, like goal oriented. And C, postpone therapy until partner returns. That's not helpful. D, ask the partner to request a delay in the assignment. That's not going to be helpful. A social worker meets with a family after the mother has been diagnosed with terminal cancer. The family members are in crisis over the prognosis. What should the social worker do next? Help the family process the grief and loss issues. Refer family to a hospice program. Explore the family knowledge about the illness. I probably would explore. It's either B or C to me. We'll figure out which one's right. Let's take this. A social worker treats a client who reports a desire to kill a former lover who recently ended their relationship. Upon further questioning, the client says that although there is a desire, it is not a strong one. The client has no definite plan. The client says, I probably won't do anything. The client contracts with the social worker not to kill form of love for. What should the social worker do next? A, notify local law enforcement of the situation. Contact the client's former lover to report the danger. Monitor the client's feelings at further sessions. D, consult with colleagues about the case. Delete between B and C for me. A social worker is consulting with a psychiatrist about referring a client for medication evaluation. Why should the social worker discuss the client's desires and expectations with the psychiatrist? To determine the client's A, current mental status, B, to assist the psychiatrist in selecting possible medications, C, to ensure the client's self-determination, D, to ensure the treatment goals are consistent. A and D is where I would sit. And I'm gonna say why I should. Oh, C. A social worker has been providing treatment to a family having difficulty adjusting to a grandparent who's moved in with them. The grandparent has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. In a family session, the family reports to the social worker that the grandparent still drives and recently knocked over the mailbox while entering the driveway. What should the social worker do first? A, inform the family of their liability if more serious accidents occur. B, involve the family and grandparent in discussion of driving concerns. C, educate the family on legal procedures for determining competency. D, help the family plan to get the car keys away from the grandparent. Let's see. Oh, is this a first? Yeah. I like explore, educate, engage. What was the C? Which one is actually the answer? A social worker in an agency routinely meets with 8 or more clients each day. The social worker is having difficulty completing the required document. What should the social worker do? Discuss the problem with the agency's supervisor. Yes. Shorten session time to complete. Nope. B. C. Complete documentation at home after work. Nope. Incorporate documenting into the sessions. I'm gonna say A. A couple with a new baby is referred to a social worker. One parent reports feeling consistently tired from going to work, cooking, cleaning, running the household, and caring for the baby. The other parent feels neglected and complains that the baby is always crying. The couple most likely are A. Having difficulty with a new life cycle stage. B. Struggling with serious family of origin issues. C. Demonstrating the need for in-home support services. D. Putting their baby in danger. I would say A. Typically at 3 hours. Where am I at? 50. Oh man, I should be at 85 right now. Okay. I'll read in them, so that's fine. A client meets with the social worker for help with depression. Recently, the client admitted to a problem with drinking. The client is resistant to talking about abstinence from alcohol. What should the social worker do next? A. Refer the client to alcohol treatment program. B. Confront the client's denial. C. Assess the client's stage of change. Next. Between A and C, so I'm just gonna go A. I mean C. C. So A is refer the client to an alcohol treatment program. B, confront the client's denial. C, assess the client's stage of change. A social worker supports the client's readiness for change by A, suggesting solutions that have worked with other clients. B, reviewing the client's previous successes. C, exploring the client's barriers to change. D, developing the change plan with the client. I would say D. Let's get one. During a family therapy session, the social worker describes the adolescent's son as 2 speeding locomotives on the same truck heading directly toward one another at breakneck speed. This form of communication is best characterized as symbolism, imagery, paradox, metaphor. Not a metaphor, it's not a paradox, it's imagery or symbolism. Or like her as that is. But all right, let's keep going. A 6-year-old child lives with a foster family. His father is in prison. His mother is in residential treatment for alcohol dependence. The child is small for his age, often has temper outbursts, and has difficulty completing schoolwork. The social worker notes that his speech is immature. What should the social worker do first? Refer the child for assessment, fetal alcohol syndrome, work with the foster parents for a behavior modification plan, see suggest the child's teacher, refer him for special education placement, work with the child's biological parent, mother towards reunification. I would say B. A social worker is assessing a hospital patient for discharge and community care. When should treatment planning begin? When the patient is ready to be discharged on the first day of hospitalization, after consulting with the patient's physician, when the patient requests a service of care planning. It's either B or C. A social worker in private practice temporarily moving to another city is temporarily moving to another city following consideration of the risks and benefits that may be experienced by each client. The social worker offers to continue therapeutic relationship with several clients through email. The suggestion is most appropriate for clients who have completed their treatment, B, would be harmed by early terminations, A, are able to cope with day-to-day issues, or D, are dealing with ongoing crises. I would say B would be harmed by early termination. It would be either B or C. Let me just go my initial response. The hospital social worker is helping a patient who has a terminal illness develop an end-of-life plan. What must the plan include? The patient wishes regarding burial. B, a recommendation for palliative care only. The patient's wishes regarding life-saving measures. Yes. A or C. Then D, a recommendation for transfer of the patient to hospice. A group of social work colleagues